Welcome to The Story. I'm Evan Watson. A massive earthquake, the big one, could rock the Northwest tomorrow, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and local elected officials are trying to prepare for any reality. A major concern is the so-called tank farm along the Willamette River in northwest Portland. Millions of gallons of fuel are stored there, and Multnomah County is considering a new way to potentially hold those fuel companies accountable should disasters strike. It's our big story tonight. That tank farm is officially called the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, or CEI Hub. When the earthquake hits, the soil underneath those 600 or so tanks will liquefy, potentially spilling that fuel. Experts have estimated a spill could reach between 100 and 200 million gallons, with as much as 82 million gallons funneling directly into the Willamette. Over the years, there have been efforts to try and mitigate the risk created by the CEI Hub. 2 years ago, the Oregon legislature passed a law requiring the companies who store fuel in the tanks to prepare their facilities for a magnitude 9 earthquake. Now, a new effort from Multnomah County to prepare for a major spill could have passed last month, but it didn't receive a majority vote to move forward, despite a year and a half of development. And because the commission's term ends this month, the new county commission will determine whether or not it's worth pursuing. We're going to dive into the proposal tonight because there is a decent chance it's revived in the new year. The ordinance deals with a concept known as risk bonding. It's meant to make sure that the owners of the infrastructure, in this case the fuel tanks, pay for the cost of cleanup should anything catastrophic happen, rather than dumping the problem onto us, the public, to pay for. Experts who analyze the hub estimate that after a spill after an earthquake could cost anywhere from $350 million to $2.6 billion to clean up, likely more as time goes on. Multnomah County's proposed measure would require that the tank's owners show that they can actually pay that if it comes to it. Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron, who will not be on the commission next year, was trying to get it passed before her term is up.
There are a number of ways that companies can demonstrate that or certify that they have enough financial resources available to cover the cost of risk. So it could be a bond, it could be through insurance, it could be through just a bank attestation. There are a number of ways, and companies can use any of those or a combination of those to say, listen, here's how we prove we have this amount of resources that will be on hand when this catastrophe hits.
Myron says that while there are federal and state regulations that require companies to clean up oil spills, like the Oil Pollution Act or OPA, those laws have gaps and loopholes.
The problem is, for example, with the OPA, and so the companies need to have a trust fund available. They have to have resources available to do this. But there is what's called an act of God clause. So that the OPA would not necessarily apply in the event of, say, an earthquake.
When the ordinance was discussed at the county's last board meeting before Thanksgiving, it had quite a bit of support from the public.
I'm here today to ask, how much would it cost to replace my life? How do you assign a dollar amount capable of returning the almost 3,000 of my neighbors, friends, and family that will be eviscerated after the Cascadia earthquake causes the critical energy infrastructure hub to explode? How much money will it take to rectify the lives of the hundreds of thousands in our region who will be injured and endure untold exposure risks in the explosion's aftermath?
Another commissioner, Julia Brim Edwards, agreed that passing the ordinance was just as urgent as addressing homelessness.
But absolutely, if you look at the potential impact, this could be the most critical issue that we work on. I've been around public processes a long time. And frankly, the way, if you want to kill something, the easiest way to do it is delay or to not to take inaction. And I think that's a very dangerous thing for this commission to do, or to say that we are searching for the perfect, which we're never going to get to.
But other commissioners were less convinced. That includes former Commissioner Jesse Beeson, who was replaced this week, and Commissioner Lori Stegman. Stegman said she wanted to support it, but she heard too many concerns about the ordinance being incomplete as it's written now.
I am deeply disappointed that this policy is not further along than it is today. Many questions remain unanswered, and I cannot, in good conscience, support a policy that has not been thoroughly vetted. Some of the testimony that we've received, even from folks here today that are very supportive, raised some really valid questions. We've also received testimony regarding the lack of engagement from BIPOC community members, so I'd like to see more engagement there.
Stegman said she also has concerns about how much it would cost to implement, and she worries that oil companies will pass on their increased costs to consumers. The proposed ordinance also had some support from some incoming Portland City Council members who will be representing District 4, where the hub is located. That includes Mitch Green, who's an economist and says an economic approach like this is a good start.
You can't put a price on ecological disaster, and you can't put a price on the risk to life safety of people who live in Linton and, even District 2, neighborhoods across the river. And so we also need to be taking simultaneously steps to require reinforcement or relocation of these tanks. And that's a kind of a physical process that takes a little bit longer, and there's different approaches to dealing with that. And I don't see the risk bonding avenue as competing with those. I think it's sort of the first step, along with many others that we'll have to take to deal with this.
In the end, the ordinance failed by a 2-2 vote. It required a majority. County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson was not at the meeting and therefore did not get a vote.
Washington State has already done this. We're not inventing this. And 18 months of sort of working on it and getting the details down was built into the ordinance. So literally there is nothing that would have been lost by passing this. The chair was not at the meeting. And so she's voiced support all along and wasn't there. And so two commissioners, I guess, did not see the urgency of this, voted against it.
Myron argued that changes could be made down the road, but it wasn't enough to sway Beeson or Stegman. So now the incoming county commission will have to decide whether to take it up after they take office in January. Myron said the board agenda was too full to add it to the remaining meetings this year. But she said she's talked to incoming commissioners and they seem supportive, so we'll keep following it. By the way, we also reached out to the Western States Petroleum Association to get the oil company's take on this. We've not yet heard back from them. In the meantime, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the tank farm issue. Should the county and or the city move with more urgency when it comes to managing the risk there when it comes to the big one? Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. An Uber driver is on trial, charged with murder in a deadly road rage case. The shooting happened in broad daylight in downtown Portland. Today, both prosecutors and the defense laid out their cases in opening statements. Both suggest they'll rely heavily on video of the incident captured by security cameras and eyewitnesses with their phones, video that we obtained as well. A warning, the video is quite graphic. Investigative reporter Kyla Boshi has the story.
Was it murder or self-defense? That's the question before jurors in a deadly road rage trial. 48-year-old Jeffrey Hammond is charged with second-degree murder and other charges for fatally shooting a man and injuring another in downtown Portland. He's pleading not guilty. On October 11th, 2023, Hammond was working as an Uber driver when he pulled up to the Moxie Hotel. Several cars passed by, including a gray Toyota pickup driven by Ryan Martin of Vancouver. Court records show the two drivers exchanged middle fingers. Video shows Martin got out of his pickup and walked back across the street. The two strangers interacted for 13 seconds. Then, Hammond shot Martin out the driver's side window. The 47-year-old died at the scene. A few minutes later, a man visiting Portland for a convention started recording on his cell phone. Hammond responded, pointing the gun and firing. That man survived after a bullet went through one leg and into the other. Hammond turned himself into police.
When you decided to fire the shot, what sort of feelings were you having at that point? Like, tell me about what's going through your head so I can get a better understanding.
I didn't even really think about it. It was just that, like, he was right there. He wasn't leaving me alone. I was intimidated, and that was kind of it. Like, it happened pretty quick.
His defense lawyer told the jury Hammond shot to defend himself, not to kill.
He was not aiming for the heart. He was not aiming for the head. He was aiming for the shoulder.
A Multnomah County prosecutor told the jury Hammond's victim, Ryan Martin, was unarmed.
No one saw a weapon on Mr. Martin. No one.
Explaining this was murder, and the video proves it, along with witness testimony and Hammond's own confession to police. The trial is expected to run through next week. It's not clear if Hammond will take the stand in his own defense. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
Up next on the story, could President Trump revoke Hunter Biden's recent and controversial pardon from President Joe Biden? We've got the answer and the legal gray area here that stretches back to 1869 and outgoing President Andrew Johnson when the story returns. Last night, we talked about President Biden pardoning his son Hunter, despite previously saying that he wouldn't. That news prompted some people to ask us, can President-elect Trump revoke the pardon when he takes office next month? Casey Decker with our Verify team has the answer.
Verify viewers wanted to know, can Donald Trump revoke Hunter Biden's pardon once he takes office in January? So let's verify using these sources. The Constitution gives the president sweeping powers to pardon people for federal crimes. There's nothing in the Constitution or federal law that allows anyone to revoke a presidential pardon once it's delivered. There is one gray area, revoking a pardon that hasn't been formally delivered. In 1869, outgoing President Andrew Johnson issued a pardon which incoming President Ulysses S. Grant tried to revoke. A federal judge ruling on the case wrote, quote, "When a pardon is complete, there is no power to revoke it." But he also said the question remains, when is a pardon complete? He decided it was not complete until the pardon is actually delivered to the person receiving it, or someone with the authority to receive it for them. In this case, the pardon had only made it through a series of messengers, the judge ruled, and was stopped before it could reach the recipient, therefore it could be revoked. This precedent was invoked more recently in 2008 by President George W. Bush. He revoked a pardon he issued after learning new information about the recipient that made him change his mind. The Justice Department at the time argued Bush was allowed to do that because the pardon hadn't been delivered yet. So, under current law, as long as Biden makes sure the pardon has been delivered to his son, it cannot be revoked. With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Still ahead on the story, we'll take you on a journey of a family mystery that sounds too wild to be true. After more than a century and plenty of persistence in the present, the dots slowly started to connect from grave robbers to a wild cold case. Catherine Cook has a special edition of Pacific Storyland when the story returns. The KGW Great Toy Drive is here, and there are less than 2 weeks left to give. Just head to kgw.com/toy to donate. And if you give this week, Oregon Corrections Enterprises will double your donation amount for double the toys, up to $5,000. You can also donate in person at 2 different collection events this weekend. We'll be at the Happy Valley Fred Meyer this Saturday from 11 to 2, or donate a toy at the Portland Holiday Brew Fest and receive an extra drink ticket. We'll be there all weekend at Pioneer Courthouse Square, help bring a little joy to local families this holiday season. Now to a family story that stretches back more than a century, involving a cold case, grave robbers, and 3 different states across the country. Catherine Cook and photojournalist Stephen Wozni take us through the twists and turns in this edition of Pacific Storyland.
most of us are shaped by family. Relatives we've known and some whose legacies we can only trace on paper. And then there's Wayne Swiller.
Just going through some of the photos.
He never imagined how his great-great-grandmother would shape his life more than a century after her death.
It's bizarre. I mean, whenever I tell anybody about it, they go, what?
Her name? Esther Ann Granger, a soul whose fate...
She was buried in a cemetery in Indiana.
...took such a twisted turn.
They believe her remains were dug up from the cemetery by grave robbers.
That only now is she truly at rest.
The technology is one part of it, right? The other is people who care.
It started last spring with a phone call to Wayne's home in Camas. His wife, Marge, answered.
They said, hi, this is so-and-so from the Kane County Coroner's Office.
Kane County, that's just outside Chicago.
She asked if Wayne Swiller lived here. I said, yes.
The coroner told Marge about a possible cold case in Batavia, Illinois, dating back to 1978. It made headlines in the Batavia Chronicle. Human bones found in home. Remodeling holds surprises. In this old house, behind a plaster wall, homeowner Martha Skinner discovered this partial skull and a lower jawbone. Said Martha to reporters, "When I first found it, I was hysterical. I could tell it was human because of its size, and I just freaked out." Police concurred. They figured the bones had fallen there from the attic, but whose were they? For the next 45 years, the skull would sit in storage at the Batavia Historical Society Museum. Then, 3 years ago, a volunteer rediscovered it, and the remains were on the move again. This time, they landed in the Kane County Coroner's Office. Deputy Coroner Gabriella Allison got the case.
I feel honored to really be a part of sharing Esther's story and Wayne's family.
Back to that first phone call with Marge.
She said, well, through DNA sequencing and paper trail, we believe that these bones are Wayne's great-great-grandmother. I hung up the phone, thought, Wayne's never going to believe this.
He didn't.
He goes, it's a scam. It's a scam. It's a scam, Marge. You fell for the scam. I go, no, it is not. It is not a scam.
Wayne called back anyway, just for fun.
I feel bad about it now, but I told her right off the bat, you know I don't believe you, right? And I'll allow you to talk, but I do not believe you.
The biggest challenge was just getting him to believe us.
Kane County Coroner Rob Russell says people in Batavia were struck by the morbid mystery and anxious to help solve it. Through crowdfunding, they raised $7,500 for DNA testing. The county hired Texas-based Othram, which specializes in cold case resolution.
Othram told us that the skull was highly processed, and in saying that, that would lead us to believe that she was used for teaching or educational purposes.
It was 1866, a time when grave robbing was a real problem. Historians tell us doctors would buy the cadavers to practice on.
This kind of thing happened, unfortunately, way too commonly.
Back then, a body-snatching wretch could fetch 4 months' wages for a corpse.
They would either part them out or they would sell them as a whole. They would make, they made money, a lot of money, as I had said. And obviously, the fresher, the better.
Esther died from childbirth. She was just 17. There are no photos of her, but that's Esther's daughter.
So this one's my mom and her brother.
They lived in Marysville, Indiana. Investigators believe that's where grave robbers dug up Esther's remains, then hauled them 200 miles north to a buyer in Batavia who lived here.
The first true homeowner of the home in Batavia was a surgeon.
The cold case was heating up. When Gabriella tracked down Wayne, all she knew about him was that he was one of Esther's last living relatives. But sometimes the story just writes itself.
And I said, do you know what Wayne used to do? Because she was talking about cold case and DNA technology. And I said, he used to work with cold case at the Portland Police Bureau. And she's like, you're kidding.
Wayne helped launch Portland's cold case unit. He's retired now, but the hundreds of cases he worked on are still with him.
It was emotional. I remember the times that our whole team was crying along with the family, and Yeah, it was really rewarding to put some sort of closure to it.
I instantly had a connection with him, just because I could tell that he was very passionate about his work. And I think that he also felt the same way about us here.
They're committed and they really want to do the best that they can.
They wanted to lay Esther to rest and, in another sense, bring her back to life. To achieve that, a forensic artist created this rendering from the partial remains. Esther Ann Granger, age 17.
I was emotional just to finally put a face to the name. I did kind of cry.
The coroner's office flew Wayne to Illinois and organized this memorial for Esther.
You know, we do this because it's important. You know, every life is important.
The city of Batavia donated space for Esther's ashes. It meant the world to Wayne.
I want to really thank Gabby and Rob for their persistence. I also want to thank them for their respect, the respect they show for my family and also for Esther.
It's true. Most of us are shaped by family. That includes the relatives we choose.
He's become a family of the Kane County Coroner's Office. Wayne, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for assisting us.
Back home,
There was a sense of like the journey is completed.
it only took 158 years and believing in the unbelievable.
I don't know what she's thinking now, but I'm very glad that she's at peace finally. Very glad.
In Camas,
I hope we did things right for her.
Catherine Cook, KGW News.
By the way, if you have an idea for Pacific Storyland, Catherine would love to hear from you. You can email her at pacificstoryland@kgw.com or text the number there on your screen, 503-226-5088. I just want to say on a personal note too, how great is that story, the twists and turns that Catherine was able to write and bring us along. And also Stephen's work, I work with him every day on the edits of taking something that happened 100 years ago and trying to make it work for TV. I love to see something like that. Thank you very much for watching and joining us tonight. For those of you watching live on TV, the good stuff is coming your way next. And for the rest of you watching online, don't forget that you can stream the story on your own schedule. Download the free KGW Plus app, which is available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Make sure to have a great Wednesday night. Stay warm best you can, and I will see you back here tomorrow, as always, at 6:30.